Bayang magiliw, peres na silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuwid ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisihin, sa dagat at bundok, sa simula, sa langit mong bughaw, may bigat ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang isap ng watawat ko'y tagumpay na lumilingin, ang bituin at araw na kailan, ang mali magdidilim, lupa ng araw na may hagit pagsinta, huwag langit sa piling mo. Ang hindi kaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Magandang araw po sa lahat ng ating mga taga-subaybay. Ako po si Lihan Alianza, isang Junior Research Associate ng Manila Studies Program mula sa Kolehiyo ng Aghamat Sining sa Universidad ng Pilipinas, Manila. Samahan niyo ako ngayong araw para sa isa na namang makabuluhang panonood sa serye ng mga lektura na handog ng MSP, ang MNL, Mga Natatanging Lektura. Ang ating panayam ngayong araw ay may focus sa kasaysayan ng pagkain, musika at teatro sa lungsod ng Maynila. Ang Manila Studies Program o MSP ay ang Regional Studies Center para sa Manila ng Universidad ng Pilipinas at ng Research Center ng Kolehiyo ng Aghamat Sining sa UP Manila. Ang MSP ay itinatag upang makabuo ng mga pananaliksik at pag-aaral na magagamit sa pagbuo ng mga patakaran at programa na higit na magpapaunlad sa Metro Manila bilang isang premier urban center ng bansa. Nakatuon nito sa mga issue at mga pag-aaral na tungkol sa lungsod ng Maynila at mga karating nitong lugar sa aspetong kasaysayan, kultura at sining, isyung pisikal at pangkapaligiran at iba pang isyung pangpatakaran. Para sa pagsisimula ng ating programa, pakinggan po natin ang isang makabuluhang mensahe mula sa pinuno ng Departamento ng Araling Panlipunan na si Assistant Professor Ruth Shane E. Legaspi, MBA.
Isang mainit at mapagpalayang araw sa ating lahat. Binabati ko ang Manila Studies Program sa isa na namang napakamakabuluhang gawain ngayong araw. Bilang Regional Studies Center para sa Maynila ng UP Manila at Research Center ng Kolehiyo ng Aghamat Sining, ang pagsasagawa ng lecture series ay masasabi kong mahalaga at malaking ambag sa pagpapalawig ng kaalaman ng mga tao tungkol sa kasaysayan na humuhubog sa Maynila kung ano ito ngayon. Noong mga nagdaang lektura, kinalakay ng mga historiador at mga eksperto na naging tagapagsalita ang ilang mahalagang paksa ukol sa Maynila tulad ng kasaysayan ng ilang universidad sa Kamaynilaan, lalo na ilan sa mga ito ay daang libo na mula nang naitatag. Siyempre, kinalakay din ng kasaysayan ng UP Manila at ng PG8 kung saan binigyan tayo ng pagsilip sa simula ng Universidad ng Pilipinas at kung saan nabatinayo ang ilan sa mga unang kolehiyo nito. Siyempre, naroon din ang pagtalakay sa kasaysayan ng Philippine General Hospital. Nitong huli, ang naging paksa naman ay mga pampublikong parke at ibang makasaysayang pok sa Maynila tulad ng Intramuros, lalo na at malaking bahaging ito ng turismo ng syudad. Ngayong araw, kaiba sa mga naunang lektura, tatalakayin naman ang Kamaynilaan mula sa perspektibo ng pagkain, libangan at musika ng mga nagdaang taon. Tiyak na magiging makulay, kawili-wili at marami tayong muling matututunan habang inaalam ba natin paano ba nahubog ang tinatawag na culinary ng Maynila ng kasaysayan nito bilang isang sentro halimbawa ng merkado, ekonomiya at politika. Ang musika nito na siyang alingaw-ngaw ng pagbuo at pag-unlad nito at libangan naman tulad ng mga teatro at iba pang pagtatanghal na nagpapakita ng mga istorya ng buhay sa Maynila noon at ngayon. Kaya naman hindi ko napapatagalin pa, sama-sama natin panoodin ang mga lektura ng ating mga panauhin ngayong umaga na para bang bibigyan tayo o sasama tayo sa isang biyahe tungo sa kasaysayan at puso ng Maynila. Yun lamang po, maraming salamat at muli magandang umaga.
Maraming salamat po, Professor Legaspi. Ngayong hapon ay makakapiling natin ang mga magbabahagi ng kanilang panayam. Hayaan niyo po akong ipakilala ang unang tagapagsalita sa hapon na ito. Si Ivan Mandi ay isang cultural tourism professional at ang tagapagtatag ng Old Manila Walks, isang kumpanya na nagbibigay ng mga lakad pamana sa mga makasaysayang distrito sa lungsod ng Maynila. Siya ay mayroong higit sa 2 dekadang karanasan sa larangan ng kultural na pamana, kabilang ang pananaliksik sa kasaysayan, interpretasyon, turismo, paglalathala at iba pang malikhaing aplikasyon nito. Siya rin ay matagal na naglingkod bilang trustee sa iba't ibang advocacy groups katulad ng Kaisa para sa Kaunlaran Incorporated o Bahay Sinoy Museum, Heritage Conservation Society at pati na rin ang Museum Foundation of the Philippines. Siya rin ay mayakda ng aklat na Deco Filipino, Art Deco Heritage in the Philippines na inilathala noong taong 2020. Siya rin ay pinarangalan ng Patnubay ng Sining at Kalinangan, Art and Culture Award ng Pamahalaang Lungsod ng Maynila noong 2017. Para talakayin ang From Fork to Feet, Sharing Community History Through Food Heritage, salubungan po natin ng isang masigabong virtual clap si Mr. Ivan Mandi.
Okay, so hello everyone, and my lecture for today is entitled the From Fork to Feet, and that is sharing community history and food heritage in the district of Binondo. So my name is Ivan Mandi, and I'm the founder of the tour outfit Old Manila Walks. So just to have a background of what we do. This is Old Manila Walks. We are a tour outfit that has been running since 2005. And basically we are a cultural tour outfit now that has been doing tours around the historic neighborhoods of Manila. That includes Intramuros, Binondo. We are a very local tour outfit because we do local history. We specialize in Manila. We advocate for a lot of things, including heritage and conservation. And we aim for our tours to be in-depth and educational so that people will learn and appreciate more the heritage of our city. So we do tours around the old neighborhoods. That includes Intramuros, San Miguel, where you have Malacanang Palace. We also do tours to non-traditional places like the Chinese Cemetery in La Loma, which is a very historic 19th century necropolis. So apart from that, we also do various bespoke tours, like design tours. One of our specialties is to do a Art Deco tour, which is the design from the 1920s and the 1930s. And we do it in partnership with Art Deco Philippines. So it's basically telling you the history from the 1920s and the 1930s, Commonwealth period, through design and architecture. But one of our famous, more popular tours in our program is called the Binondo Food Walk, which is what I'm going to be talking about for this lecture. So the Binondo Food Walk, it's a historical cultural tour of Chinatown. It's one of the tours that sort of put us in the map. Because it's a very fun tour. Okay, it's a very not only fun, it's fun not just for the mind but also for the tummies. So I'm gonna show you what went through the whole process of doing this activity. Okay, so basically it is a historical tour. You have to think of it, the Binondo Food Walk, as a historical tour with a food element in it. So it would have 3 ingredients. That number 1 would be, of course, the food. So we go around restaurants in the neighborhood and sort of eating our way through. So that's feeding the tummies. But we also like to feed the minds, no? And apart from the food, Binondo is a place that is full of history, community history, family history, that most people do not really know about when they come and visit the neighborhood. So we aim to tell the stories of the community and the people through the food that is served in the experience. And that's why it's called the Binondo Food Walk. So as you know, Binondo is one of the oldest neighborhoods in Manila. It's been around since the 16th century. And it was one of those places which were referred to historically as extramuros, which was outside the city walls. And that was the area where historically the Chinese immigrants, who made up a important community in the history of Manila, settled or have been settling since the 16th century. Okay, it's just right across Binondo, Intramuros, I mean. And for most of us today, when you think of Binondo, this is the first image that comes out to most people's minds. It's Chinatown. Okay, but Binondo wasn't always Chinatown. No, before that we had places such as the Parians, or the Chinese areas, which was outside the city walls. No, so Binondo only really became a Chinese quarter, or Chinatown as we know it, when the last of the Parians were demolished in the 18th century. And that's when the Chinese were allowed to live across the river from Intramuros, and a lot of them settled in what is today Binondo. Eventually shaping the character of the place. So for us today, again, Binondo equals Chinatown. And you know that it's ethnic neighborhood, no? When you start seeing the Chinese arches that welcome you to the main entrances of the neighborhood. So this one is the Filipino-Chinese Friendship Arch, which was erected in the 1970s during the time of President Ferdinand Marcos. So there are around 5 of these original arches that are in Chinatown. This is the most famous one, going down from Jones Bridge. And they were all erected when the First Lady Imelda Marcos was the governor of the then newly created Metropolitan Manila. So Binondo is a trading neighborhood. It's a commercial district, but apart from that, it's also a food neighborhood. No, so there are a lot of restaurants here. Seeing that one of the most typical and common trades that the Chinese went to when they migrated to Manila was through food, or F&B, food and beverage. So a lot of the restaurants, or oldest restaurants in Manila, are actually found in Chinatown. That includes the classic panciterias of the old, which you don't see much today. Okay, so the oldest one is this called Panciteria Toho, which is now called the Toho Food Center. Well, it's been around since 1888, as they say. Okay, of course, apart from that, we also have other old-timer restaurants in the neighborhood from the 1920s, the 1930s, 1940s, 50s onwards. Okay, so the longevity of these places now are a testament to the community, to the history of the community that has been serving food for a very, very long time, and nourishing tummies, and being a place of community gatherings, coffee, social interactions. Okay, but of course, apart from the food, there's also what I call as urban ethnic culture in Binondo. and that can be very much seen in the Chinese Filipino traditions that you see in the place. So a lot of these traditions were brought over by our ancestors who migrated from Fujian province or in Canton province from China in different periods. No, so they brought with them traditions in cultural traditions, not just food, no, beliefs, expressions, no, that today you still see in Chinatown, which gives Binondo its unique character, no, that sets it apart from the other historic neighborhoods of Manila, let's say Intramuros, no, which has a very Spanish colonial feel. So in 2014, the Department of Tourism had a program called Culinaria Food Trips. So basically they aim to promote these areas in our country through food. Okay, so they had different programs or food tour programs in provinces such as Iloilo, in Batangas. To the north, you had Pampanga, Bulacan, Ilocos. In the Visayas, you had Bacolod, Bicol, and Cebu. So, but if you notice, what's unique about this food trips is that our tour, the Binondo Food Walk, was singled out, and it's the only place on the list which is not really a province, but it's actually a neighborhood, no, a small neighborhood, no. It's not a region, but a small inner city district. So that that tells you that Binondo is in the consciousness uh, as a community food um, neighborhood destination. So our tours are usually 2 hours. It has been running since 2005, so it has changed a lot. But the basic elements are the same. Is that we learn community history through your tummies. So we eat, we walk, we talk, we listen, we learn, we have fun. We put all of those ingredients and elements in our tour, just so people do not just leave the tour with their tummies full, but also with their minds enriched. So our tours are not just for foreign tourists. We do a lot of local domestic tourists. Like this one, we have a group of students from Cagayan de Oro, no, who did a 4-day uh, tour from Manila to Pampanga, and one of their stops was our Binondo food walk. So it's a very new experience for these participants since they don't really have a Chinatown in Cagayan de Oro. So it's a good way to introduce to them our community history and heritage. We also do it for kids, little kids, no? We do bespoke tours, no? The tours are basically adapted to their school lessons. Now, in this case, they're learning about migration, specifically Chinese migration. No? So we went around Chinatown to talk about this subject. But of course, there's the food element because food is very much part of the history of that migration. When the Chinese immigrants, came and they brought in stuff which became part of our melting pot. We've also done it for other non-touristy or non-tourist related activities like team buildings for corporate companies. So the Beyond the Food Walk has evolved. It's not really just for tourists per se, but it has actually a lot of uses as an activity. This one was for a team building. It's just a day out in the office. A change of environment. So being a tourist in your own city, which is what they did. And I and as you can see, everybody had fun. We've also used this program for collaborations like marketing, for certain companies. Here we have a food magazine, who who did the tour, and since it's a food tour, we gave out promotional items like food magazine. We've also done this tour, the food tour for celebrating life moments. That includes birthdays or anniversaries, or just having visitors, like balikbayans. This was one of the last tours that we did before the world shut down in 2019 during the pandemic. It was actually a birthday tour, um, of a lady who was celebrating her 40th birthday. So instead of treating everybody out just for dinner or lunch, she made it more exciting, or we made it more exciting by doing a food tour for everyone. It's a very thematic food tour, as you can see, complete with certain traditions like lion dancing. No, because this was done just before Chinese New Year. Okay, and of course, very memorable for the participants and the birthday celebrant herself. And one of the most unique experiences that we have done for this tour is we did a tour, the food walk, that ended up becoming a wedding proposal for this lady. So it was quite a spectacle. She didn't have any idea, but in the end, she said yes, and they lived happily ever after. So once in a while, we have notable people who uh, will visit Binondo, and I mean they'll get to experience our tour program. That includes government officials, local and international celebrities. So to further uh, our promotion of Binondo, no, we also came up with a literature, which is called the Binondo Food Walk Map. This is basically given out after our tour, and it lists down the places where you can eat and you can visit throughout the Chinatown district. So it's a very comprehensive um, piece of tourist literature, uh, and of course written with an insider uh, point of view. No, so it's a good guide, really, if you want to explore Chinatown on your own. So this is given out after our tour for free. So if you join the Binondo Food Walk, then you will get a copy of this one. So that's it. That is a little something about what we do, and the tour that we do. It's been running since 2005, so we are now in our 19th year of walking in Binondo, and we're still having fun. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat po sa makabuluhang pagtalakay sa napakalagang paksa ng pagbabahagi ng kasaysayan sa komunidad sa pamamagitan ng food heritage. Ngayon po ay tutungo na tayo sa susunod na panayam. Ang ating ikalawang tagapagsalita sa hapon na ito ay buhat sa University of Makati, kung saan siya ay isang kawaksing propesor ng kasaysayan. Si Kevin Paul D. Martija o Ose ay guro ng kasaysayan at kulturang popular sa Pilipinas. Nagtapos siya ng bachelier sa sekundaryong edukasyon, major sa kasaysayan sa Pamantasang Normal ng Pilipinas noong 2013, masterado sa Araling Pilipino, major sa Wika, Kultura at Media sa Pamantasang Lasal, Maynila noong 2017, at kasalukuyan namang kumukuha ng doktorado sa Araling Pilipino sa Universidad ng Pilipinas, Diliman. Ang mga interes niya sa kanyang mga nalathalang saliksik ay umiikot sa interseksyon ng kasaysayan at musikang popular sa Pilipinas. Para sa ikalawang paksa na kasaysayan ng kilusang pangkistan ng Kamaynilaan, 1980 hanggang 1989, pasalubungan po natin ng masigabong palakpakan si Assistant Professor Kevin Paul Ose Martija.
Okay. Magandang araw sa lahat. Bago ako magsimula ay pinapasalamatan ko Manila Studies Program sa imbitasyon sa akin upang maging bahagi ng sampaksaang ito. At magpapakilala muna ako. Ako si Kevin Paul D. Martija o mas kilala bilang Ose. At ibabahagi ko ngayong araw ang ilang bahagi ng aking thesis masteral na pinamagatang Kasaysayan ng Kilusang Pangkista ng Kamaynilaan 1980 to 1989. Bilang introduksyon, ang lekturang ito ay katatampukan ng ilang bahagi ng aking thesis masteral sapagkat limitado lamang ang aking oras. So sasalay-sayin dito ang klima ng panahon, pagbubuo ng eksena, produksyong kultural, at iba pa nilang karanasan sa panahong nasasakop ng saliksik. Sino nga ba ang itinatampok natin? Makikita dyan sa larawang ito mula kay Jun Piana, mga kabataang pangkista. Sa larawang ito ay nasa barikada sila ng Menjola noong taong 1985. Bakit Kilusan? Maraming nagtatanong sa akin, no, kahit sa eksenang pangkista sa kasalukuyan. Sapagkat ito'y salin ng movement. No? Ang ginawa kong thesis masteral kasi ay nakasulat sa wikang Filipino. Tinutukoy dito bilang cultural movement o kilusang kultural yung pag-usbong ng eksenang pangkista ng Kamaynilaan noong dekada 80. At laging binibigyan diin, no, ng mga pangkista na bilang kolektibo, hindi sila isang kilusang politikal, ngunit bahagi ng isang tiyak na eksena, no, ang eksenang pangkista nga na tinatawag. Sentro ang Kalakhang, Maynila dahil naririto nakapuok ang mga pangkista. Naging bahagi ng kasaysayang ito at dito rin umusbong ang sinasabi nating eksena noong dekada 80. Gumawa ako ng guhit panahon sa aking sinagawang saliksik at hinati ko sa tatlong bahagi, no, yung kasaysayang ito. Pero ito yung original na makikita sa aking thesis, pero sa kasalukuyan may mga nais akong i-revise dito. No? Pwede nating hatiin sa tatlong yugto, noong 1980 to 1982. Ito yung first wave ng mga pangkistang banda, hindi rin The Jerks, Chaos, College, at ito yung panahon na tumutugtog sila sa tinatawag natin on disco. 1983 to 1984, ito yung panahon ng second wave ng pag-usbong ng mga pangkistang banda. Ito rin yung panahon na nagkaroon ng mga Battle of the Bands sa telebisyon at pag-iiba yun ang tinatawag nating Brave New World series of concerts. No? At 1985 to 1989, ito yung taon ng Twisted Red Cross label at kulturang zine sa eksenang pangkista dito sa Kamaynilaan. So mamaya, no, titingnan natin ano yung ibig sabihin ng mga yugtong ito. Pero kailangan din natin munang maunawaan, no, ano nga ba ang punk? No, of course, napakaraming definisyon kung ano nga ba ang kulturang punk, depende sa makakausap, pero siguro may common denominator naman kasi nag-branch na rin yan sa iba't ibang mga subcultures and subgenres, no? Mayroon tayong tinatawag na the Great US versus UK debate kung saan nga ba talaga nagsimula, no, yung punk movement noong 70s. Pero nahubog ang kilusang kultural na ito bilang tugon sa pamamayani ng konsumeristang kaasalan at kultura ng glam at hippie movement, no, noong dekada 70. Sa musika, karaniwan yung punk music na iksi, walang mga guitar o drum solo, distorted ang gitara na siyang pinakaangat yung tunog, mabilis yung ritmo at tempo, karaniwan ilang chords lamang ang gamit sa isang kanta. So sa pamamagitan ng ganitong struktura ng mga kanta, mas naging tawag dito, na-democratize kumbaga yung rock music sa pamamagitan ng punk, hindi kagaya nung uri ng musika, no, yung tinatawag na natin ngayong classical rock, no, bago nagkaroon ng punk na syempre technical at hindi kaya ng isang nag-uumpisa o baguhan pa lang na musikero, no. Sa estetika, dahil nga tinatakol yung consumerismo, inanak ng punk yung ideolohiyang DIY or do it yourself, no. So makikita natin na rebellion ang kulturang ito kapwa doon sa musika at estetika ng kanyang panahon. Makikita natin ito sa mga unang sinasabing mga unang punk bands, no, kagaya ng Ramones, Sex Pistols, and of course si Richard Hell. Makikita natin kahit yung presentasyon nila sa kanilang mga sarili ay hindi kagaya nung parang uh, 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 mga forma, no, nung nandun sa classical rock na tinatawag natin at yung glam movement na tinatawag. Paano naman nakarating yung punk sa Pilipinas? No? Sa pamamagitan ng programang Pinoy Rock and Rhythm ng DZRJ-AM at ng DJ nitong si DJ Howlin Dave, no, papasok yung musikang punk sa mga radyong Pinoy noong dekada 80 bilang tanda, no, ng pagsisimula, no, ng at pagsilang, no, ng punk movement sa Kamaynilaan, Kalaunan. Nakuha kasi ng DZRJ noong 1978 yung karapatan upang i-ere sa kanilang istasyon yung BBC London's Rockline. No? So, ibig sabihin, napapatugtog nila yung mga musika na sikat, no, sa UK nung panahon na yun. At nung panahon na yun, of course, sikat yung punk music. So, nadala, no, ng DZRJ sa ating dito sa Kamaynilaan. Kalaunan, sa DCRJ din mapapakinggan yung mga record ng mga naunang pangkistang banda sa Kamaynilaan. So talagang malaki yung role ni DJ Howlin Dave at ng Pinoy Rock and Rhythm, yung DCRJ, kung bakit magkakaroon ng punk movement sa Pilipinas noong time na yan. No? Kalaunan, no, may mga banda na rin na malay sila na tumutugtog, nagko-cover sila ng punk music, no? Partikular yung mga napapakinggan nila sa DZRJ at yung mga kopya nila ng plaka or cassette na naipadala sa kanila ng kanilang mga kamag-anak o kaibigan na nasa ibang bansa. So karapat dapat salungguhitan dito yung mga unang punk bands, no, na nasa irang ito, no, 1980 to 82. Makikita natin diyan yung The Jerks, of course yung College, yung Chaos, no. Marapit doon sipiin na sa ganang ito, sa umpisa yung mga kabataang nasa uring burgis o nakaririwasa talaga yun, nagkaroon ng pisikal na kopya ng mga pangkistang album mula sa Amerika at Britanya. Katunayan, si Tommy Tanchanco ng Chaos, no, yung banda, ay anak ni Ministro Jesus Tanchanco ng NFA. So isa sa mga ministro ni dating Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos. Yung On Disco ay pagmamayari din ng kanilang kamag-anak na si Sunny Tanchanco. Gusto kong tingnan nyo itong tawag dito, ticket sa isang konsyerto noong 1982. Pansinin na magkakasama pa sa line-up sa mga panahong ito, yung mga bandang pangkista at yung mga folk groups, no? So makikita mo dyan, yung Chaos, yung College, etc., etc. Pero may mga folk groups, no? Yung On Disco sa Rojas Boulevard, yung unang-unang bar na nagbigay ng espasyo dito sa mga bandang ito noong taong 1980, ayon kay Tommy Tanchanco, sa taong ito may isang araw sa isang linggo na inilalaan ang On Disco para patugtugin yung mga bandang tumutugtog ng punk at new wave. Ito yung tinatawag na new wave nights sa On Disco, no? Makikita pa natin yung progreso, no, nung punk movement dito sa susunod na taon kasi i-oorganisahin ni Tommy Tanchanco yung Brave New World Concert Series sa Phil Trade Center mula 1981 hanggang mid-80s. So makikita natin dito, no, ang lakas ng koneksyon ni Tommy Tanchanco sa tatay niya, ministro ng NFA. So nagagamit, no, yung espasyo ng Phil Trade Center, no, bilang concert ground ng mga bagong punk band nung time na to. So lahat ng ito nagpapakilala ng pribilehiyo ng mga nagtaguyod ng kilusang pangkista, partikular yung gampanin ni Tommy Tanchanco, at adika niya may pakilala at makatuklas ng mga bagong pangkistang banda. So makikita natin sa mga concert ticket naman na ito, pagsapit ng 1984, wala na mga grupong folk, karaniwan din sa mga sports complex, kagaya na makikita niyan Pasay City Sports Complex, Dapitan Sports Complex, nagkakaroon ng mga konsyerto yung mga pangkistang banda. At lahat ng mga sports complex na to, of course, nasa loob lang din ng Kamaynilaan. Mag-iibayo pa yung punk movement, yung eksenang pangkista, pagsapit ng taong 1983 onwards, kasi makikita natin sa mga taong ito, 1983, magkakapaglabas ng mga plaka, ng mga single nila, yung ilang mga pangkista and new wave na banda, nandun sa borderline na gano'n, no, kagaya ng Chaos at Ocean Zoo noong 1983. By 1984, magkakaroon ng full-length album. Yung Chaos na tatawagin ng Third World Chaos, ang pangalan ng album nila ay New Move for Error. Yung bandang The Jerks, no, magkakaroon sila ng mga recording na patutugtugin sa DZRJ, no? Subalit hindi ito mailalabas sa isang plaka until 2022 pa, no? Yung mga recording na pinatutugtog sa DCRJ nila noon, no? 2022 lang nailabas. Ayan po yan. Okay. So, titingnan natin yung punk noong 1983 to 1984. Masasabi natin ngayon, hindi maitatatwa ng mga kabataang Burgis yung unang nagtaguyod na humaling, no, sa kulturang ito. Naging oportunidad sa pagpapakilala at pagpapalawig ng popularidad yung serye ng mga konsyerto sa Brave New World, mga paligsahan sa telebisyon na mangyayari taong 1984, paglalathala at pagpapatugtog ng mga materyales sa radyo ng mga naunang pangkistang banda. At mula rito sa mga again, no, sa taong 1983-84, uusbong yung mga susunod na alon ng mga pangkistang banda. Nandiyan yung Woods, Philippine Violators, Dead Ends, Collision, at iba pa. Kailangan sipiin bilang tanda ng lumalawak na popularidad nito sa Kamaynilaan yung pagsulpot ng mga tribo, o ito yung tawag sa pangkat ng mga pangkista sa iba't ibang lokalidad dito sa Kamaynilaan na laging dumadalo sa mga konsyerto. Sa kabilang banda, makikita natin sa mga susunod na slide yung pagtingin ng mainstream media na fad lang yung punk, uso lang, at paglikha ng iba't ibang karikatura mula dito. Makikita natin ito halimbawa sa pelikulang The Punks ni na Ray P.J. Abellana at Lenny Santos. So makikita mo sinakyan pati ng pinila ng movie industry, no, yung popularity ng punk noong time na yan. Pero syempre, ang daming misrepresentation sa mga pangkista na makikita sa pelikulang yan. Makikita din natin yung karakter ni Ariel Villasanta sa bilang pangkista perpekto sa School Bukol. So, ginawang katatawanan, parang pinakita, uso lang sa mga kabataan sa panahong ito, etc., etc., kinahihiligan lang, no? Samantala, sa kabilang banda, sa mainstream pa rin, makikita natin na nagbukas ng espasyo, no, yung ilang mga television program para magkaroon ng band contest, no, sa kanilang mga istasyon. Isa na dito, kailangan nating sipiin yung ito yon ang galing sa PTV noong 1984, no. Dito sumali yung ilang mga punk bands, no, na tumutugtog na rin naman sa Brave New World. Okay? Pinapakita ko rin dito sa slide na to yung larawan ni Dominic Gamboa ng Betrayed, and of course si Chikoy Pura ng bandang The Jerks. At makikita natin ang antikas ng pormahan nilang dalawa. Anyway, pagtapos ng taong ito na makikita natin kahit papaano, no, binibigyan ng pansin ng mainstream media yung punk sa mga taong ito. Pagsapit ng taong 1985, no, maitatatag ni Tommy Tanchanco yung record label, isa sa mga kauna-unahang underground record label sa bansa, yung Twisted Red Cross label. No? Ito yung marka ng panibagong yugto sa kasaysayan ng mga pangkista ng Kamaynilaan. Muli, ang tagapagtatag nito ay si Tommy Tanchanco na nasa likod din ng Brave New World. No? Dapat rin sipiin yung gampanin nila Dodong Viray, James R2, DJ Howling Dave, at ang Jingle Magazine sa pag-uulat ng mga lilalathalang album ng Twisted Red Cross label. So makikita natin, inabot ng Twisted Red Cross label yung mga taon, huling taon ni dating Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos hanggang sa mga unang taon ni dating Pangulong Corazon Aquino, dahil umiral ito mula taong 1985 to 1989. At nakapaglabas po ang label nila ng 17 album mula sa iba't ibang mga pangkistang banda, no? At may mga crossover thrash and metal bands pa nga na nakapasok dun sa mamaya, no, pag-uusapan natin yan. Samantala, ito po yung logo ng Twisted Red Cross label ni Tommy Tanchanco. So, pag-usapan natin yan. Mula po kay Romel Cruz, no? Ito po yung spine ng mga cassette album, no, na nilabas ng TRC mula 1985 to 1989. Mukhang yung Complaints na album lang ng Dead Ends yung wala dito. Pero ayan po, halos kumpleto po yan. Okay? At syempre, hard to find na yung mga cassette na yan. Sa mga panahong din ito, taong 1985, ay nauso yung bentahan ng mga underground tapes at mixtapes. Tandaan natin kasi no naging kahit papaano nagkaroon na siya ng popularidad, hindi na lang yung mga kabataang nakaririwasa yun na humaling dito, pati yung mga kabataan na nandun sa lower class. Of course, wala silang access dun sa tawag dito sa original no ng mga materyales. So saan sila aasa? Doon sa mga piratang cassette o yung mga mixtapes na mas mababa yung presyo kumpara dun sa original na materyales. And of course, yung iba naman kasi kaya lang nagkakaroon ng mga original album, no? Kasi may kamag-anak sila sa ibang bansa, pero hindi nga lahat may ganong koneksyon. So, makikita natin yung role dito ng iba't ibang mga record shops kagaya ng Phoenix Tapes Records sa Kamuning at A to Z Records, no, na nagbukas noong 1985 sa Anonas, no. Naging sentro rin ng tape trades at punk boutiques yung Tandem Cinema at Cartimar sa Recto. So ito yung ilang sa mga mahalagang espasyo na umusbong sa yugtong ito ng kasaysayan ng mga pangkista sa Kamaynilaan, no? So makikita din natin from nung early 80s, meron kang Brave New World, pero pagsapit nung mid-80s, magbubukas yung Katrinas sa Mabini, Corner Remedios, no? Ito yung magiging pangunahing espasyo sa tugtugan ng mga pangkista noong kalagitnaan ng dekada 80. So, pag sinabi mong Katrinas, no, ang mga tumutugtog dito, ayan, makikita niyo naman sa kanilang patalastas, no? Primarily, mga pangkistang banda o hardcore na banda ang makikita na tumutugtog sa espasyong ito. Ito ring yugtong ito ang panahon na uusbong yung mga fanzines bilang alternatibong tagapag-ulat ng mga pangyayari sa loob ng eksenang underground sa Kamaynilaan. Muli, noon, nakaangkla yung galaw ng mga pangkista sa pag-uulat, no, ng Jingle Magazine. Pero pagtutong ng taong 1986, 7 onwards, no, lalaganap yung kulturang zine sa loob ng underground scene ng mga pangkista. Sinasabing ang unang fanzine na nalathala ay yung Garbage fanzine nila June Ijot ng GI and the Ijots, no? Nandiyan yung Herald X, kagaya na makikita natin sa larawan. Isa siyang fanzine noong 1987 nalathala na konektado rin sa mga nasa likod ng Twisted Red Cross label, no? Nandiyan yung Manila Oy, Blatant Underground, Mutilated News, at iba pa. Tanda rin ito ng popularidad ng pilosopiyang DIY sa mga nasa loob ng komunidad ng mga pangkista sa yugtong ito ng kanilang kasaysayan. DIY, bakit? Kasi nga, nilalathala yung mga fanzines sa pamamagitan nito, no? DIY, cut and paste, at gamit lamang yung photocopying machine sa reproduksyon. Hindi professional yung mga tagapag-ulat nito. Karaniwan, yung mga parokyano, nanonood, at kahit yung banda lang din, yung naglalathala, nag-i-interview, nagsusulat ng mga artikulo sa mga fanzines na ito. Pinapakita ko sa slide na ito yung Mutilated News at Garbage fanzine, no? Nagtatampok sa mga banda sa eksenang underground, lokal man o internasyonal. At hindi lang yung mga kwento tungkol sa mga banda at eksena ng local and international scene, mamaya makikita rin natin, naglalathala din sila ng mga artikulo at ng mga opinion nila tungkol sa mga pangyayari sa lipunan nung panahon na ito. So, ayan. Pag-usapan muna natin yung klima ng panahon kung kailan umiral yung eksenang pangkista. Bagamat nasa huling bahagi na ng panunungkulan si Marcos sa panahon ng pag-usbong at pag-iral ng punk movement sa Kamaynilaan, sa teknikalidad ay wala ng batas militar, nananatili pa rin ang karasaan ng Estado laban sa mga kritiko nito. Ayon sa panayam ko kay June Ortega o June Ijot ng GI and the Ijots, sa Anya, may quote, sabi, wala ng martial law pero nandun pa rin yung stigma. Parang ganun pa rin yung kalakaran ng mga pulis. So parang ano lang kami, favorite kami ng mga pulis, damputin, pagdaruan. At syempre, sa panahong nasa sakop ng saliksik, ito naman yung panahon ng Rehimeng Aquino, halos magiging tema ng mga panitikan at balita yung disintegrasyon ng mga panlipunang kilusan naging bahagi ng EDSA. Nariyan din yung balita ng mga politikal na pagpaslang, kudita, at lalong-lalo na yung panunumbalik ng mga dating elite na pinalitan ang mga crony ni Marcos, no? So, merong umiiral na politikal na ligali sa panahong nabanggit kung saan umiral, no, yung eksenang pangkista sa Kamaynilaan. Marapat siguro sa bahaging ito na sipiin ko ang ilan sa mga kinapanayam kong pangkista noong sinagawa ko ang aking thesis masteral, no? Ayon nga kay Aldi Malanta, and I quote, "Ang daming galit sa gobyerno ng kabataan dati dahil nakikita namin kung anong nangyayari sa gobyerno. Ang tagal suppress ng communication, we had no way to express. Paano namin masasabi yun? Wala. Tas biglang punk rock. Nagkaroon kami ng banda. Nagkaroon kami ng way to express. Nagkaroon kami ng way para mapakinggan." So makikita natin dito, mula sa kanyang pahayag, no, na nakasangkapan yung punk rock para masatinig yung kanilang mga saloobin at syempre para mahubog rin, no, yung kanilang identidad. Of course, bata sila nung panahon na yan, no? At mula kay Arnold Morales ng bandang Urban Bandits, no, and I quote, sabi niya, "Talaga namang stupido kami sa music. Wala kaming alam. Hindi naman kami marunong humawak ng gitara eh. Puro attitude. So ang tingin nila sa amin, walang mangyayari dyan. Pero hindi kasi nila nakita yung lyrics. Yun ang pinakamalaking problema. Hindi nila nakita yung lyrics." Muli, babalikan natin yung sinabi ko dito kanina na dun sa unang bahagi ng dekada 80, ang tingin kasi sa punk, uso, kinagigiliwan ng mga kabataan, pero idinidiin ni Arnold Morales na hindi nila nakita uh, yung threat, kumbaga, ng punk music na mas mauunawaan kung makikita yung lyricismo ng mga awitin na kinata nila sa mga panahong ito. Dapat din natin sipiin si Bobby Balingit ng Goods. Ayon sa kanya, noong panahon ng martial law, bad trip yan, mahirap ang bigas noon, may halong mais. Mga magulang ko, pumupunta sila sa kalye at nagrarally sila ng panahon na yun. Yung kantang at Kalimutan ng Diyos, hindi pa bumababa si Marcos ng panahon na ginawa ko ito. So, anong ibig sabihin dito ng mga musikerong ito? Sina Aldi Malanta, Arnold Morales, and of course, Bobby Balingit. Ano ba makikita? No? Dun sa mga kanta nila, mabibilis, maiingay, agresibo. Kung uunawain kasi natin, no? Kaya naman, pinapaksa at naging paksa ng mga nalathalang awitin sa mga album at mga artikulo sa mga zine na nailabas sa period na ito, yung mga pangyayari sa lipunang Pinoy sa panahon ng Remeng Marcos at Aquino. Sa mga tuwid, naging lunsara ng kulturang punk upang masatinig yung boses ng mga kabataan sa komunidad nilang ito. Makikita natin halimbawa, maraming awitin. 17 albums yung tinatalakay natin, pero sisipi lang ako ng ilan sa mga awitin, no? Nandyan yung The Flag ng bandang GI and the Idiots mula sa kanilang album na Fascinating World of Garbage na nailabas noong 1986. Dito makikita natin yung karikatura kay Marcos bilang kanibal at pedophilia. Remember, no, kahit bago pa yung Twisted Red Cross, no, yung mga recording na ito ay pinatutugtog sa DZRJ. So nandun pa si Marcos sa poder, pinatutugtog ito, tas walang nakagets na protest music pala, no? Yung karamihan dun sa o yung ilan, no, sa mga napapatugtog sa radyo ng time na yan. No? Makikita naman natin yung lyrics ng kanta, no, ng GI and the Idiots, "The Philippine flag is a dirty old rag and Ferdinand is a fairy. He eats little girls and sucks little boys," no? So nakakatawang paglalarawan, no, kay Marcos, no. Nandyan din yung bandang Betrayed sa kanilang kantang Never Again. Makikita natin sa lyricismo nito yung lantarang pagtutol sa pasistang pamamahala. No, nandun nga mismo yung title ng kanta, no, Never Again. Okay? Gayon din, no, nagawan ng ilang mga kanta yung ilan sa mga historical na pangyayari nung panahong ito, no, kagaya nung snap election ng IOV na lumabas sa kanilang album na Another Destructive Century noong 1987. Ginawan talaga ng kanta yung kantang yung snap election ng 1986. So makikita natin ang kawalan ng tiwala sa proseso ng halalan at pamahalaan. Gayun din, of course, kagaya ng sinabi ni Bobby Balingit kanina, yung pinakasikat na awitin nila na At Nakalimutan ng Diyos ay nagawa na niya nung panahon na nakaupo pa si Ferdinand Marcos. Bagamat nalathala yung kanta, no? Nailabas yung kanta noong 1992 na, no? So makikita natin yung lyrics ng kanta, grabe no, sobrang kapangyarihan, sobrang kayamanan, sobrang katakawan, ilan sa mga mamamayan na nagsisigawan, mga ganid. Makikita natin diyan yung pagpapakasasa sa absolutong kapangyarihan samantalang naghihirap yung mamamayan. So may konteksto na kinapapalooban yung mga kantang na isulat, na ilabas, na painggan sa mga taong ito. Hindi lamang din, kagaya na sinasabi ko, no, makikita sa mga awitin, makikita natin kahit dun sa mga nilalathalang artikulo sa zines. Sinabi ko na kanina, yung mga zines primarily nagtatampok sa mga banda at pangyayari sa lokal at international na eksena ng mga pangkista, pero may espasyo rin na makikita sa mga punk scenes noong 80s kung saan nilalathala yung opinion sa iba't ibang issue patungkol sa Administrasyong Aquino, kagaya ng kopya ng mga zine na ito mula sa mga pahina ng Mutilated News Fanzine. Pasasalamat kay Noel Francia, no, yung kopya ng Mutilated News Fanzine. No. So makikita natin dyan yung mga issue ng human rights violations noong panahon ng Rehimeng Aquino, si Gringo Honasan, of course, yung kaliwat ka ng kudita na ginawa niya. Ayan, may karikatura mismo ni Corazon Aquino. At nauso rin nung mga panahong ito, yung vandalismo noon sa mga pulyetos ng mga politiko, tulad na makikita sa larawan, no? Makikita sa larawan ni si Senyor Ratten, gitarista ng bandang Philippine Violators, na nakangarat, no, sa larawan. Ayan po yan, no? Larawan po yan ng tambalang Marcos Tolentino noong 1986. No? Pasasalamat muli kay Jesus Espiritu or Senyor Ratten at sa kanya ko po kinuha ang larawang ito. Hindi lang din mga protesta, may mga natatanging karanasan din na pwede tayong sipiin kung saan hindi naging maganda yung danas ng mga pangkista sa kamay ng otoridad, no? Maaari nating ihalimbawa dito yung 1986 gig, no, sa University Belt ito kung hindi ako nagkakamali, kusang hinuli yung daang pangkista sa isang konsyerto dahil pinaratangan silang mga adik, no, at sinama sila sa presinto pero pinalaya rin naman kalaunan. So may ganung diskriminasyon, no, sa mga pangkista dahil hinuhusgahan sa kanilang kasuotan, probably dahil din sa tugtugan, no. At syempre, pinakamalala, yung paratang na satanista yung mga pangkista na nangyari noong taong 1987. So kumalat at naging malaking balita noong 1987, itong bagay na ito, nalathala sa mga pahayagan, sa telebisyon, etc. etc. To the point na naglabas pa ng memorandum ang Ministro ng Edukasyon sa pangunguna ni Ministro Lourdes Quisumbing upang manmanan ang mga paaralan sa paglaganap di umano ng satanismo. Yung description kasi ng mga satanista na kumakalat daw sa Metro Manila during that time, ang tinutukoy talaga mga punk, no, mga nakamohok, hardcore yung tugtugan, mga naka-boots, etc. etc. So, hinimok naman ng nooy gobernador ng Kalakhang, Maynila na si Jejo Marbina, yung ministro ng edukasyon, na pagbawalang pumasok sa mga paaralan ng mga pangkistang mag-aaral dahil sila umano'y masamang impluensya, no, sa mga kabataan. So may mga ganyang mga pronouncement mula sa mga top officials mismo kontra sa mga pangkista. Matatandaan naman sa pagsasakonteksto na ang taong 1987 ay taon kung saan dineklara ni Corazon Aquino ang People's War kontra sa mga rebeldeng mga kaliwa. Kasabay nito ay yung paglipanan ng mga vigilanteng grupo katulad ng Tagtag. So makikita natin, no, panahon ng ligalig talaga ito at nadamay pa, no, yung mga pangkista. Okay? So bilang pagtatapos, bakit hanggang 1989 lang? Panandamba to kasi sa kasaysayang tinalaka yung compilation album na Philippines, Where Do We Go From Here ng taong 1989. Ito yung TRC-17, meaning yung huling album na nilathala ng TRC label. Ayan po yan, no? Matapos itong nilathala, nagbago ng karera si Tommy Cancianco bilang producer sa isang mainstream record label At dito na magwawakas, no, yung yugto ng Twisted Red Cross, no. At matapos ang yugtong ito na kinakatawan ng TRC, umusbong yung mga panibagong underground label na magtataguyod ng eksenang pangkista sa Kamaynilaan ng dekada 90. Ito yung Middle Finger Records, and of course, yung Rare Music Distributor. Na siyang magtatawid, no, sa komunidad ng mga pangkista sa Kamaynilaan noong dekada 90 naman. At dito ko na siguro tatapusin ang aking lektura, no? Muli ako nagpapasalamat, no, sa Manila Studies Program at UP Manila sa pag-iimbita sa akin, at naway marami kayong natutunan, no, sa pagbabahagi kong ito. Yun lamang at maraming salamat. Rock and roll.
Maraming salamat po, Professor Martiha, para sa interesanting paksa tungkol sa kasaysayan ng kilusang pangkista sa Maynila. Upang kumpletuhin ang hanay ng ating mga tagapagsalita ngayong araw, narito ang isa sa mga miyembro ng Renacimiento Manila, isang grupong may pokus sa pamana at makasaysayang lugar sa Maynila, kung saan siya rin ay ang kasalukuyang pinuno ng edukasyon at pananaliksik dito. Si Riel A. Diala ay isang arkitekto, manlilikha at manunulat. Siya rin ay isang tagapagtaguyod ng tamang pangangalaga ng ating mga gusaling pamana at ng pagdisenyo ng makakalikasan at makataong arkitektura. Siya ay nakapagtapos ng kursong Bachiller ng Agham sa Arkitektura na may karangalang cum laude sa Universidad ng Pilipinas, Diliman noong 2020. Bilang estudyante, siya ay naging miyembro ng Heritage Conservation Society Youth at naging pinuno ng edukasyon at pananaliksik sa UP Task Force RT, kung saan siya ay nagsaliksik ukol sa mga problemang pabahay at mga informal settlements. Nakapagtapos din siya ng pagsasanay bilang isang climate reality leader noong 2020, kung saan siya ay nagsisiyasat ukol sa krisis pangklima at ang koneksyon nito sa arkitektura. Bilang arkitekto, siya ay nagkaroon ng iba't iba pang mga proyekto, kabilang na ang Holy Rosary Parish Church sa Angeles City, Pampanga, at ang retablo ng simbahan ng Manawag sa Pangasinan noong siya ay nagtrabaho sa Escuela Tarlier de Filipinas Foundation Incorporated. Sa kasalukuyan, siya ay ang pinuno ng edukasyon at pananaliksik sa Renacimiento Manila, isang organisasyong nagsusulong ng mga reforma para sa proteksyon at pangangalaga ng kultura at pamana ng Maynila. Bilang isang manlilikha, ang kanyang mga gawa ay mga digital at tradisyonal na anyo ng sining, pati na ang iba pang mga anyo tulad ng origami, kung saan siya ay nakapagpasagawa ng mga workshop ukol dito sa iba't ibang eskwelahan at mga institusyon. Kabilang din sa kanyang mga interes ay ang pangongolekta ng lumang barya at perang papel. Para sa ikatlong paksa na The Old Popcorn Palaces of Manila, pasalubungan po natin ng masigabong palakpakan si Architect Riel A. Diala.
Good day everyone. I will be presenting for today the Popcorn Palaces of Manila, the old standalone cinemas and theaters of Manila which flourished before the war and during the golden age of Philippine cinema. This is the outline of the presentation. From a brief history of the theater in the Philippines, its connection to cinema, how the standalone cinema appeared and evolved throughout the years, and the movie house today. I'll also be talking about architecture a lot in this presentation, since it is a contributing factor to the prominence of the movie house in the Philippines, especially in Manila. I'll be interchangeably using the terms theater and cinema, since theaters can function as cinemas and vice versa back then. The theater and the cinema go hand in hand in the history of entertainment in the Philippines. Just to note, the lecture will only be scratching the surface on the history of Philippine theater and cinema for the interest of time, so attendees and viewers are also welcome to look more into the topic. So the beginnings of theater in the Philippines. So we have the Teatro al Aire Libre, or the open-air theater, which is considered to be the oldest form of theatrical buildings in the Philippines. So they have the entrance lobby, the audience section for spectators, the entablado, or the stage platform, which is usually demarcated by an arc called the proscenio, or the proscenium, the metaphorical vertical plane that separates the audience from the stage. There are also the backstage areas, which is the location for dressing rooms, scenery and equipment, workshops, and storage rooms. There's also the Camarin Teatro or the Barn Theater, such as those built in Arroceros and Tondo. These are bamboo and nipa or thatch structures with podiums and an audience section with wooden benches. During the Spanish colonial period, there are these plays called Zarzuela and Comedia, which were popular during those times. The Comedia was religious in nature and was used by the Spaniards to further disseminate Catholicism in the Philippines. The usual storyline of the Comedia centers around the Christian-Moro conflict, romances between Christian and Moro characters, and Moros being converted to the Christian faith. The Zarzuela, on the other hand, descended from the Spanish zarzuela, also known as the operetta, situational in nature and depicted scenes in the daily lives of Filipinos told with story and dance. And these usually centered around situational or political issues, as well as other common topics including romance, greed, revenge, among others. An example of the theater during the Spanish colonial period is the Teatro de Binondo, which opened in 1846. So from the carriages, theater goers would enter through the main entrance into a wide lobby with a balustrade balcony above the lobby so moviegoers can air themselves during intermission time. In this photo, that balustrade balcony is the colonnade on top of the entrance. The theater was not only a performing arts venue, but it also had other amenities. So it had 2-story wings. The first floor, called the Salon Bajo, was for coffee and billiards. Second floor, on the other hand, was the Salon Alto, which was supposed to be for dances and concerts, but were used instead as offices and living quarters. The theater itself was semicircular in plan, akin to an amphitheater, though it also had its limitations such as poor acoustics. Eventually, the structure was damaged in an earthquake in 1863. Next, you have the Teatro del Príncipe Alfonso XII. It was built in 1862 and located in the currently Arroceros Forest Park. The theater became home to different companies, such as the Compañía Dramática de España and the French Operetta Company, which relocated to Arroceros from Quiapo. Eventually, though, this theater was destroyed by fire in 1878. There's also the Teatro Circo de Zorilla, which was built in the late Spanish colonial period in 1893, and it was circular in plan. The interior was adorned with intricate frescoes and an abundance of oil paintings, such as here in this photo. And the Teatro Circo de Zorilla became the theater for the wealthy and the elite. And it was also the venue for zarzuelas and concerts. It eventually closed down because theaters were obligated to be equipped with electric lights and the owners could not afford this luxury. Then the Teatro Zorilla, which had a love-hate relationship with the government, would open and would close and open again to accommodate other plays and then close again. So it eventually closed around the late 1890s. On the other hand, the Manila Grand Opera House began as the National Cycle Track. It wasn't just the venue for performances such as Spanish and American dramas, but it was also where the Russian circus performed. Other dramas, such as Claro M. Recto's La Ruta de Damasco or The Road to Damascus, and Patricio Mariano's Ang Pakakak or The Shellhorn, were performed in the Manila Grand Opera House. It was also in this theater that national artists graced the halls, such as Atang de la Rama, Wilfrido Maria Guerrero, Gerardo de Leon, and Lamberto Avellana. It was also a historical site, because it was where the inauguration of the first Philippine Assembly was held in 1907. The Manila Metropolitan Theater, on the other hand, was constructed to address the need for a national theater in 1920s cosmopolitan Manila. It was inaugurated in 1931 and was designed by Juan Arellano in the Art Deco style of architecture. So Juan Arellano also did the Manila Post Office, the Jones Bridge pre-war, and the Chamber of Commerce of the Philippine Islands. The contractor was Pedro A. Ciocci and Company, who was also the contractor of the Manila Post Office. The stained glass window at the facade was done by Kraut Art Glass, Also did the stained glass windows of the Holy Rosary Parish in Angeles City and the Santuario de Santo Cristo in San Juan. Statues and bas-relief sculptures at the facade and the interior were done by Francesco Ricardo Monti, while the paintings at the lobby, namely the dance and the history of music, were done by Fernando Amorsolo. In the interior, on the other hand, there are also other bas-reliefs, such as the tropical motifs at the interior, at the ceiling, and those were done by Isabelo Tampinco, who also did the reliefs at the Senate Hall, the National Museum of Fine Arts, and the retablo of the Basilica of Manaoag. Now, why am I showing these performing arts theaters? It's because if not in use as a theater, the Manila Metropolitan Theater operated as a cinema. The Manila Grand Opera House would also later on show movies like a cinema house. So, the history of cinema and theater in the Philippines goes hand in hand, especially architecturally, because the plans of theaters and cinemas were very similar. Now, moving on to the beginnings of the movie house, the cinema, and its roots as Escolta. To reiterate, the first electric power plant, La Electricista, was established in the country in the 1890s along Hidalgo Street in Quiapo. Now, with the advent of electricity, because of La Electricista, it became possible to import more cinema equipment in the country. And one of those establishments that were able to utilize such equipment was the Salon de Pertiera. It was originally a photograph parlor managed by Senor Francisco Pertiera, and the first films shown during the Espectáculo Científico de Pertiera, or the Pertiera Scientific Show, were shown here. These were French silent films with subtitles, accompanied by a piano or orchestra. These were relatively simple films, such as Man with a Hat, Scene from a Japanese Dance, The Boxers, and the Place La Opera. So these are photos from Pertiera's studio along Carriedo. It wasn't just Escolta. Eventually, movie houses or standalone cinemas were constructed to become venues where showings of such films took place. And the layout of the standalone cinema did not differ much from a theater. So there's the orchestra, or the lower seating area, the balcony, or the upper seating area, and there's the projection booth, which was located opposite the screen, above and behind the balcony. Now we move on to architecture and commercialism. The cinema as a literal palace of entertainment. So the use of grandiose designs, following architectural trends of their time to market the cinemas and garner the attention of potential moviegoers and patrons, was commonplace. So these were theaters designed in the Art Deco, streamlined modern, and similarly impressive styles of architecture, which were considered modern during their time. Not only that, but they were also designed by significant architects during their time. Some would later on be declared as national artists for architecture. One example of such cinemas was the Cine Ideal along Avenida Rizal. So the Cine Ideal was originally a smaller wooden structure built in 1908. But it was replaced in 1933 by a larger Art Deco concrete structure designed by national artist Pablo Antonio. So it had a seating capacity of 1,009. So this is the lobby of Cine Ideal. And this is the balcony seating area looking towards the proscenium and the stage. Another example would be Capitol Theater, which was built in 1935. It was designed by the first national artist for architecture, Juan Nakpil. It was designed in the Art Deco style. It was owned by the Rufino family, who also owned other theaters such as Avenue, Ever, Gaiti, and State Theater. The Art Deco bas-relief sculptures at the facade are the works of sculptor Severino Fabie. In the lobby was the painting Rising Philippines, a work of national artists Victorio Edades, Carlos Botong Francisco, and prominent artist Galo Ocampo. Unfortunately, this painting was destroyed in the Second World War. So this is the lobby of Capitol Theater, though this was already taken after the war. And this is the balcony seating area. On the other hand, we have Times Theater, which was owned by the Aranetas. It was designed by architect Luis Maria Araneta, who was an architect and antiquarian. It was designed in the streamlined modern style of architecture, while the bas-relief sculptures of either Eugenio Bunuan or Francesco Monti, adorned the interior of the theater. It first opened in 1941, and it incorporated neon backlighting at the facade as a decorative effect, while the air inside was purified and deodorized with ozone. General Douglas MacArthur himself inaugurated the theater, while Vice President Sergio Osmeña during that time and Carlos P. Romulo attended the inauguration event. So this is a photo of the lobby which I took during the pandemic in 2021, and even though Times Theater was already past its prime during this time, you could still sense the grandiose design in the lobby. So there was an abundance of cinemas in commercial districts and communities, such as Rizal Avenue, Escolta Street, Quezon Boulevard, and Recto Avenue, among others. Now let's move on to the Japanese occupation and the Second World War. During the Japanese occupation, some theaters showed Japanese propaganda films, while some completely stopped cinema operations and reverted back to live performances. These structures were also badly damaged during the Battle of Manila, some in worse conditions than others. However, amidst the ruins of houses, commercial spaces, and other structures, these grandiose palaces would still stand. This photo was Capitol Theater along Escolta after the Second World War. On the other hand, this is Avenue Theater along Rizal Avenue, also after the war. And here in this photo, you have Cine Ideal, State Theater, and in the distance, Avenue Theater. Now let's move on to standalone cinemas after the Second World War. Times Theater was considered to be the first theater to reopen after the war. This was along Quezon Boulevard. And people were so starved for entertainment, they would line up to these theaters to watch a movie. Eventually, ruined theaters were reconstructed and new cinemas were constructed, especially in the late 40s and during the golden age of Philippine cinema, which was considered to be the 50s, while some including the 60s to the early 80s. So in this photo, you have Live Theater after the war in 1949, and on the right is a photo of the lobby of Live Theater. So there's Carlos Padilla Jr., Emma Alegre, Nida Blanca, and Nestor de Villa promoting their movie, Tignan Natin, which was directed by national artist Manuel Conde. In this photo is Escolta Street in the 1960s, and visible in the photo are the Capitol and Lyric Theaters. And this is Rizal Avenue in the 1960s. So you could see Cine Ideal, State, Ever, Avenue, Universal, and other standalone cinemas. Here's another view of Avenida Rizal. And you could see Regency, which was Talisay. There's Lords and Janet, Avenue, Odeon, and Capri Cinemas. There's also Quezon Boulevard. This photo visible is Globe Theater. And here you could see Main and Live Theaters also along Quezon Boulevard. The decline of standalone cinemas. So these later on became obsolete. Malls, where the different needs and wants of the consumer can be obtained under one roof. And they grew in popularity. So not only did these malls have shops, groceries, restaurants, among others, but they also had theaters and cinemas. Standalone theaters, which were quite limited in use, became obsolete. The further death of standalone cinemas came with the popularity of pirated movies and DVDs. And in the new age, the business of standalone cinemas is near non-existent at this point, and the popularity of streaming services such as Netflix, where movies can be watched in the comfort of the consumer's home, certainly did not help with the standalone theater's demise. Eventually, these theaters, remnants of the past and obsolete today, were converted into other uses, such as hotels, commercial spaces, such as Bellevue, and even churches, such as Scala at some point. Considering the layout of a cinema was similar to a church, the construction of the LRT-1 along Rizal Avenue also created an unwelcoming atmosphere underneath the railway and further led to the decline of the theaters in that area. Theaters which were still operating survived through the showing of X-rated or adult films. Such theaters became prostitution dens and often were raided and closed by the government because of such illegal activities, though these theaters would open again after. And the majority of the theaters were abandoned, most being demolished to make way for new development. I'll be now showing a couple of standalone cinemas which stand and used to stand in the city of Manila. Note that this is not a comprehensive list for the interest of time. First, you have Escolta Street, which was considered to be the shopping center for the elite. You have Capitol and Lyric Theater. Lyric Theater, which opened in 1917 and was designed in 1937 by national artist Pablo Antonio. So Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered at Lyric Theater in 1938. Eventually, Lyric Theater was demolished in the 1970s to the 80s to make way for St. J. Square. Capitol Theater, on the other hand, after the decline of standalone cinemas, was opened to commercial establishments on the ground floor. However, very recently, the theater was demolished, mostly demolished, in 2018, save for the tower. The agreement was that the tower would be retained because it was a presumed important cultural property, as it was designed by national artist Juan Nakpil, and it was also at least 50 years of age. However, the developer proceeded with the demolition of the tower, and the NCCA issued a cease and desist order for the demolition of the structure. Though the demolition has ceased, we have to remain vigilant regarding the state of this structure. At Plaza Santa Cruz, on the other hand, there was Cine Lux, which became Cine Rivoli, which became Tivoli, and after the war, it became Cine Santa Cruz. There was also Radio Theater, which became Cine Oro, which became Cine Astor, and after the war, it became Cine Savoy. So Radio Theater was designed also by national artist Juan Nakpil. So this is Cine Santa Cruz and Cine Savoy after the Second World War. And these are the locations of those two theaters now. They have since been demolished. It's interesting to mention that Radio Theater was replaced by another Nakpil structure. There's also the theaters of Ronquillo Street, Palace, and Mayfair, which both started operation in 1951. Of course, both theaters no longer exist today. There are also the cinemas of Rizal Avenue, such as Ideal, State, Ever, Universal, Fox, which later became the Lisa and later on Regency, and the Twin Theaters of Lords and Genet. Ever, Universal, and Lords and Genet are post-war theaters. Ideal Theater was designed by Pablo Antonio, while State and Ever Theaters were both designed by Juan Nakpil. So these are other photos of the mentioned theaters, and these are the locations of the theaters today. Ever has since been converted into an Astrotel, while the Universal Theater is utilized as a commercial space. Lords and Genet's building is still there, though the theater has since stopped operations. Up north, at Rizal Avenue, there's also Avenue, Odeon, Capri, Roxanne, Dynasty, and Galaxy. Avenue Theater was designed by national artist Juan Nakpil. Capri was designed by national artist Pablo Antonio, as well as Galaxy Theater. So Capri, Odeon, Galaxy, Dynasty, and Roxanne are post-war theaters. Eventually, Avenue, Odeon, and Galaxy Theaters were demolished. Further up north, along Rizal Avenue, was the Manila Grand Opera House, which we have discussed earlier, the New Cinema Shopping Center or Forum Theater, and Scala Theater, which were both designed by Pablo Antonio, and Pearl Theater. The Manila Grand Opera House has since been demolished and replaced by the Manila Grand Opera Hotel and Casino. Along Recto Avenue, you have Recto Cinema, Vista, Roben, and Dilson. Also along Recto Avenue was Hollywood, Eastern, Tandem, and Manila. And of these four cinemas, only Hollywood is still operational, though since resorted to showing X-rated films. Eastern has since become Cartimar Recto. Quezon Boulevard, there are also the theaters of Quezon Boulevard such as Main, Times, Life, Boulevard, Globe, and Leader, which later on became Ginto. Main was designed by national artist Juan Nakpil, Times was designed by Luis Maria Araneta, and Life was designed by Pablo Antonio. The majority of Life was demolished, while the facade was incorporated into this new condominium project. If you've been to Quiapo Church, you've seen this behind the church. Also along Quezon Boulevard was Center Theater, Roman Super Cinerama, and New Love Theater. Roman Super Cinerama was one of the more advanced theaters during its time. It opened in 1964, And since it was a cinerama, it had a curved projection screen. So it was a relatively new concept during its time. Unfortunately, it burned down in the 70s. Center, on the other hand, was later on demolished, while the New Love Theater building still exists along Quezon Boulevard. The facade is adorned with the bas-relief sculptures of Eugenio Bunuan, who did the bas-relief sculptures as well of the Life of Manuel Quezon at the Quezon City Hall. Other theaters in different locations are, well, we've discussed earlier, the Manila Metropolitan Theater. I'll be including this here since we've also discussed this earlier. There's also the Luneta Theater along Calao Avenue. There's Gaiti Theater along MH Del Pilar. Bellevue along Heran, which is now Pedro Hill. Gay or Major, also along Pedro Hill. And Bataan or Clover Theater. What's significant about Clover Theater was that other than being the performance stage of Dolphy, Pugo and Tugo, Katie de la Cruz among others, it was also where Herman Moreno worked as a janitor and curtain raiser at Clover Theater. Gaiti was demolished a couple of years ago, which is a shame because it's also another work by national artist Juan Nakpil. Gay or Major got demolished as well as Clover Theater. Bellevue became a Super 8 store. Metropolitan Theater, at least, was restored a couple of years earlier. It was restored by the NCCA. And it reopened, I believe, in 2021. Also, other theaters are Vision along Tetuan Street near Dasmariñas Street, Rex Theater along Ongpin, Zest along Hidalgo, and Deluxe along Florentino Torres Street. Of course, all of these theaters have since been demolished except for Rex Theater, which is now President's Tea House. These are my references, and thank you very much to listening to my lecture today. And it is not comprehensive list, and it's just a scratch on the surface for the interest of time. But there are a lot more information to be uncovered regarding this topic. So thank you very much.
Maraming salamat po, Architect Riel, para sa pagtalakay ng makulay na kasaysayan ng mga dating sinehan sa Maynila. Sa puntong ito, upang bigyan ng paglalagom ang mga inilahad na paksa, bigyan natin ng isang masigabong palakpakan ang isa sa mga guro ng Departamento ng Araling Panlipunan sa UP Manila na si Binibining Keveli Vince M. Panetta.
Isang mapagpalayang araw sa ating lahat. Una, nais ko pong kilalanin at pasalamatan ang ating mga tagapagtalakay na nagbahagi ng kanilang kaalaman bilang mga dalubhasa sa kanilang paksa. Nais ko din batiin sa matagumpay na webinar series ang Manila Studies Program sa pangunguna ni Dr. Wensley Reyes na walang sawa sa pag-oorganisa ng mga ganitong inisyatibo. At sa lahat po ng aming mga tagapakinig, maraming salamat po sa pagbabahagi ng inyong oras. At maraming salamat po sa pagsuporta sa mga ganitong programa ng UP Manila. Naway madami din po kayong napulot na kaalaman. Hayaan niyo pong aking simulan at basahin ang paglalagom sa naging talakayan. Ang tatlong paksa natin sa araw na ito ay mahahalagang ambag sa mas mainam na pag-unawa sa cultural history ng Maynila. Ang mga pag-aaral na gumagamit ng cultural history approach ay nagbibigay kahulugan sa mga naging pamumuhay ng mga tao ng nakaraan sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay diin sa kanilang mga naging kakaiba o natatanging gawi sa kanilang komunidad. Sa madaling sabi, ito ay ang pagtuklas natin sa kultura ng nakaraan. Ang kultura ay ang nabuong way of life para sa mas mainam na adaptation ng mga tao sa kanilang ginagalawang konteksto, at ito ang siyang sinasalamin ng ating mga natalakay. Una, ang From Fork to Feet, Sharing Community History Through Food and Heritage ni Ginoong Ivan Mandi ay nagpakita sa atin ng isang kakaiba at nakakabusog na paraan ng pag-aaral at pagpapahalaga ng kasaysayan ng Maynila, partikular na sa lugar ng Binondo. Lingid sa kaalaman na nakararami, ang Binondo ay kinikilala bilang pinakamatandang Chinatown sa mundo. Noong 1594 sa ilalim ni Gobernador General Luis Perez Dasmariñas, pinayagan na manirahan sa POK na ito ang mga sinaunang Tsino na nagpabautismo sa Katolisismo upang manatili sa Pilipinas. Noong 1800s naman, ang Binondo ay nakilala bilang sentro ng industrialisasyon at komersyo sa Pilipinas. Naglipa na ang mga guilds, artisans, mga nagtitinda ng bulto at tingi, mga tiendas at iba pa. Tulad nga ng nabanggit ng ating tagapagsalita, malaking bahagi ng kasaysayan ng Maynila ang naging pag-usad ng Binondo at ang pagsusuri sa natatanging cuisine na nabuo ng komunidad na ito ay binibigyan tayo ng pagkakataon na maranasan ng kasaysayan sa pamamagitan ng pagkain. Literal na a taste of history. Ito ay nalalapit sa suri ng dating Profesor Doreen Fernandez sa kanyang sanaysay na Culture Ingested, na nagsasabing ang pagsusuri sa Filipino food at kung paano nabuo ang Filipino cuisine ay susi para magkaroon tayo ng malawak at malalim na pag-unawa sa ating kultura at kasaysayan. Sa ganitong suri, masasabi natin na ang pagkaing Pilipino ay isang salamin sapagkat ang dynamism ng Filipino cuisine ay nagpapakita din ng dynamism at multiplicity ng Filipino identities. Ito po ay ilan lamang sa mga litrato na nagpapakita kung gaano talaga ka-bustling ang Binondo noon. Pangalawa, ang kasaysayan ng kilusang pangkista ng Kamaynilaan mula 1980 to 89 ni Professor Kevin Paul Ose Martiha ay nagbigay sa atin ng mas kritikal at mas malalim na pagtingin sa naging punk movement sa Pilipinas bilang isang valid na cultural movement ng panahon nito, na hindi ito isang fad lamang. Ang paglaganap ng punk music ay nagbunga din ng mas accessible at mas demokratikong paggawa ng musika para sa mga kabataang Filipino noon at naging daan upang ipahayag ng mga kabataan ang kanilang social awareness at pagkadismaya sa sistema ng lipunan. Dito ay muling maitatanong natin ang madalas na diskusyon ukol sa sining na art for art's sake versus art for life's sake. Masasabi natin na ang naging pangkistang kilusan sa Pilipinas sa panahong 1980 to 89 ay mas mainam suriin gamit ang panig ng art for life's sake, na nagsasabing ang mga produktong kultural ay laging dapat nakaangkla sa social context o social reality nito, na ang silbi ng sining ay ang magkaroon ng real-world impact. Gamit ang suri na ito, mas makikita natin ang naging kahalagahan ng punk bilang isang cultural movement, pagkakakilanlan o identity at social critique. Sa pagbabalik tanaw sa mga lirisismo ng iilang banda at pagkumpara nito sa sitwasyon natin ngayong ika-21 siglo, tila ba patuloy pa din ang ating pagsayaw sa bubog at pagtingala natin sa mga banal na aso at santong kabayo na muli tinatawag tayo na makaramdam ng rage. Sa mga tagapakinig, naway mabigyan din ng panahon na pakinggan ang iilan sa mga awiting ito at naway makaramdam tayo ng camaraderie sa mga naunang henerasyon ng Pilipino at magkaroon ng inspirasyon sa kanilang naging kilusan. Pangatlo, ang The Old Popcorn Palaces of Manila ni Architect Riel A. Diala naman ay pinasilip sa atin ang nakaraang itsura ng Maynila sa pagsusuri sa mga lokasyon at itsura ng gusali ng mga lumang bahay pelikula at mga teatro sa Kamaynilaan. Nabigyan tayo ng ideya kung ano ba ang kinalilibangan ng mga Manilenyo noon sa kabila ng magulong pagpapalit ng kolonyal na kapangyarihan mula Amerikano papunta sa mga Hapon at muling pagbabalik ng mga Amerikano. Nakakalungkot lamang na sa naging talakayan ay pinakita ang pagsasawalang bahala sa mga lugar na ito na kung tutuusin ay mga historical places na din. At ang karamihan pa nga ay idinisenyo ng mga tanyag na alagad ng sining. Ang pagsusuri sa mga arkitektura ng nasabing gusali ay pinapahayag sa atin ang naging mga lifestyle, aesthetics at mga design principles. Halimbawa, ang pagiging prominente ng Art Deco na estilo ng sinaunang komunidad. Binibigyan tayo nito ng mas malalim na pagpapahalaga sa naging social life ng nakaraan. Nabanggit din na sa pagbabago ng panahon, sa pagdami ng mga malls na nagpapalabas ng sine, paglaganap ng pirated films at pagkakaroon ng streaming services, ang karamihan sa mga lumang bahay pelikula at mga teatro na ito ay giniba at pinalitan ng mas bagong gusali o di kaya'y naging bahay pelikula na lamang para sa mga X-rated na palabas at nagiging pugad ng prostitusyon. Kahit papaano, ay mapalad tayo na muling naibalik sa dating kabantugan ang Metropolitan Theater at kahit papaano ay muli nating nasisilip ang mga pasilyo ng nakaraan. Sa naging talakayan ngayong araw ay naipakita sa atin kung paano hinuhubog ng tao ang kultura at paano naman hinuhubog pabalik ng kultura ang tao. Ang mga paksa sa araw na ito ay natutulungan tayong sagutin ang tanong na ano nga ba ang bumubuo sa identidad ng isang Manilenyo? At ang sagot dito ay nakakatulong din sa mas malaking salik na masagot natin ang tanong na ano nga ba ang bumubuo sa ating pagka-Filipino o Filipino identity sa ika-21 siglo? Muli, maraming salamat po sa pakikinig.
Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Paneda, para sa inyong makabuluhang paglalagom sa mga panayam. Upang pagbigyan pugay at pasasalamat sa mga nakipanayam ngayong araw, nais naming ibigay ang sertipiko ng pagpapahalaga sa lahat ng ating mga tagapagsalita sa ika-4 na episode ng MNL, Mga Natatanging Lektura, na may focus sa kasaysayan ng pagkain, musika at teatro sa lungsod ng Maynila. Hayaan niyo po akong basahin ang nilalaman ng sertipiko. Certificate of Appreciation is presented to Ivan Mandi, Assistant Professor Kevin Paul Martiha, at Architect Riel A. Diala for being a speaker in the webinar MNL, Mga Natatanging Lektura, with the theme Food, Entertainment, and Music in Manila, held virtually on the 16th of February 2024 via the MSP Facebook page and YouTube channel. Signed, Wednesday M. Reyes, PhD, Convener, Manila Studies Program, and Professor Maria Constancia O. Carillo, PhD, Dean, College of Arts and Sciences, University of the Philippines, Manila. Muli, maraming salamat sa ating mga kasama na nakiluhok sa diskusyon ngayong araw. Nawa ay marami tayong natutunan mula sa ating mga tagapagsalita. Mangyaring salubungin natin sila ng isang masigabong palakpakan. Isang huling paalala sa ating mga tagapakinig at nanonood ng MNL, Mga Natatanging Lektura, na may focus sa kasaysayan ng pagkain, musika at teatro sa Maynila. Mangyaring iscan lamang ang QR code para sa link ng ating survey form para sa naganap na panayam. Makakaasa kayo na ang anumang impormasyon na ipinagkatiwala ninyo sa amin sa pamamagitan ng survey na ito ay aming iingatan. Maraming salamat po sa inyong kooperasyon at panahon. At mula sa Universidad ng Pilipinas, Manila, Kolehiyo ng Aghamat Sining at Manila Studies Program, isang taos-pusong pasasalamat sa lahat ng lumahok sa ika-4 na serye ng MNL, Mga Natatanging Lektura. Magkikita-kita po tayo muli para sa isa na namang seryeng makabuluhan at punong-puno ng kaalaman ng saliksik pangkasaysayan. Ito po ang inyong lingkod, si Lihan Y. Alianza. Mabuhay ang Maynila at magandang araw sa lahat. Muli, maraming salamat.
You